Very warm welcome to all the MSc final year biochemistry students. Today in the second lecture of the chapter Disorders of Carbohydrate Metabolism, we are going to study the topic factors affecting blood glucose level. So as we all know that the normal blood glucose level of 80 to 120 mg per 100 ml blood, which corresponds to 4.5 millimolar, is maintained by the combined action of two major hormones, insulin and glucagon, which are secreted by the beta and alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans respectively in the pancreas. In addition to these, two other hormones like epinephrine, which is secreted by the adrenal medulla, and cortisol, which is secreted by the adrenal cortex, play an important role in the maintenance of the blood glucose level. Insulin signals that the blood glucose level is higher than necessary. Hence, cells take up excess glucose from the blood and convert it to storage compounds like glycogen in liver and muscles and triacylglycerols in the adipose tissue. So here you can see that insulin helps in the conversion of glucose to glycogen and glucose to triacylglycerol in the adipose tissue. So in the liver, insulin activates glycogen synthase, here you can see, and inactivates glycogen phosphorylase, so that glucose 6-phosphate is channeled into glycogen. Insulin also activates the oxidation of glucose 6-phosphate to pyruvate via glycolysis and the oxidation of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. So here you can see that it activates insulin, the conversion of glucose to pyruvate and acetyl-CoA. This acetyl-CoA is used to generate ATP along with CO2. If not oxidized, this acetyl-CoA is used for the generation of free fatty acids and exported as triacylglycerols of plasma lipoprotein VLDL to the adipose tissue. On the contrary, glucagon acts antagonistically and it signals that blood glucose level is too low, and the tissues respond by producing glucose through glycogen breakdown and in liver by gluconeogenesis, and also by oxidizing fats to reduce the use of glucose. So here in this case there is glucose deficiency, so alternative sources of energy like glycogen and triacylglycerol are basically preferred for energy generation, and the glucose is less utilized. It stimulates net breakdown of liver glycogen by activating glycogen phosphorylase and inactivating glycogen synthase. So here you can see that glucagon activates glycogen phosphorylase and inactivates glycogen synthase triggered by cyclic AMP. Glucagon also inhibits enzyme pyruvate kinase by promoting its CAMP dependent phosphorylation. So here you can see it also inhibits enzyme pyruvate kinase, thus blocking the conversion of phosphoenol pyruvate to pyruvate and preventing its oxidation via citric acid cycle. This accumulation favors gluconeogenesis. Glucagon activates TAG breakdown by causing cyclic AMP dependent phosphorylation of perilipin and TAG lipase, that is triacylglycerol lipase. The activated lipase liberates free fatty acids which are exported to liver and other tissues as fuels, sparing glucose for the brain. So it also stimulates the formation of perilipin and TAG lipase. So now coming down to epinephrine. Epinephrine is secreted by the adrenal medulla as a result of acute stressful stimuli, as it is flight or fight hormone. So it is released in response to acute stressful stimuli like fear, excitement, hypoxia, hypoglycemia, etc., and leads to glycogenolysis in liver and muscles. Epinephrine is released into the blood to prepare muscles, lungs and heart for a burst of activity. Like glucagon, it activates glycogen phosphorylase and inactivates glycogen synthase, thus stimulating conversion of liver glycogen to glucose. It also promotes anaerobic breakdown of muscle glycogen by lactic acid fermentation, stimulating glycolytic ATP formation. It also stimulates TAG breakdown and finally stimulates glucagon secretion and inhibits insulin secretion, thereby mobilizing fuels and inhibiting their storage. On the other hand, cortisol is a corticosteroid hormone which is released in response to chronic stress, and it is relatively slow acting hormone that alters metabolism by changing the kinds and amounts of certain enzymes synthesized in its target cell rather than by regulating the activity of existing enzyme molecules. So basically epinephrine acts very quickly in response to acute stress, whereas cortisol is responds to chronic stress. So it is a long or relatively slow acting hormone. So here you can see the stress plays a major role in development of diabetic complications. So now coming down to the other disorders of carbohydrate metabolism, we come down to galactosemia. Galactose is one of the two simple sugars along with glucose which is used to make lactose. It is converted to galactosamine followed by its N-acetylation, and these derivatives are used in the synthesis of mucopolysaccharides like chondroitin sulfase. So here in this reaction you can see that galactose is phosphorylated with the help of ATP and enzyme galactokinase to galactose 1-phosphate, and then it is attached to UDP which is donated by UDP glucose, and with the help of the enzyme galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase to form UDP galactose plus glucose 1-phosphate. Here the glucose 1-phosphate is released for energy generation. This UDP galactose enters the liver and affects the liver metabolism. In galactosemia, enzyme galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase, this enzyme is severely diminished or entirely missing due to mutations, leading to toxic level of galactose 1-phosphate in various tissues, and patients cannot convert galactose to glucose. They have problem in digestion of milk lactose, and they suffer from jaundice. It was first discovered or described by Frederick Gropert in 1917, and it has an autosomal recessive inheritance pattern. The symptoms involves drowsiness, jaundice, liver cirrhosis, high amounts of galactose 1-phosphate in tissues, blood, and followed by urine, convulsions, sometimes mental retardation, liver enlargement, and severe forms of cataracts, etc. Treatment is unknown, but patients are advised to stop milk intake. So the next disorder is pentosuria or xylulosuria. It was discovered by Tuster in 1959. It is an inborn error of pentose metabolism. It is caused due to defective or absent enzyme L-xylulose reductase necessary for xylulose metabolism. Thus L-xylulose is excreted in urine. Such patients are advised not to take fruit or fruit juices because this type of pentose or xylulose is present in higher quantities in the fruits. It is a harmless biochemical anomaly, so no cure is needed. Such patients show difficulty in diagnosis of diabetes because L-xylulose is a reducing sugar, so it may give a false diagnosis of diabetes. Now coming down to the various types of tests which are used to diagnose this disorders of carbohydrate metabolism. So the first test is glucose tolerance test. Glucose tolerance is the ability of the body to regulate the blood glucose concentration after the administration of a test dose of glucose, normally 1 gram per kg body weight. There is oral administration of 75 grams of glucose in 300 ml water to a person fasting overnight. A venous blood sample is taken at the 0 time point, that is the fasting blood glucose, and followed by the blood taken at a 30-minute interval like 30, 60, 90 and 120 minute. Blood glucose is measured in these samples and plotted against time. If a person is diabetic, then it goes to 170 to 200 mg or above depending upon the diabetic complications per 100 ml of the blood. Otherwise it is 180 to 130 mg per 100 ml. Criteria for normality is the return of curve to the initial value within this 2 hours. So here in this figure you can see that this is the curve for the normal person and the insulin treated diabetic person, while the red curve shows the curve for the diabetic person, which shoots about 200 and it comes very slowly to the normal level. So the next test is galactose tolerance test. As we all know that galactose is a C4 epimer of glucose, where at the 4th carbon position you can see that the hydroxyl group is in a different orientation. So this left side is the acyclic form or the linear form of glucose and galactose, and towards the right you can see this is the cyclic form of glucose and galactose. So here also the fourth position is the changed orientation of hydroxyl group. So it is a test of the ability of the liver to remove galactose from the blood and convert it to glycogen. There is an oral administration of 40 grams galactose plus per 400 ml of water. After every 30 minutes, blood sample is taken and measured for the level of galactose, which is plotted against time. Between 1 to 2 hours, it is completely neutralized in normal person, but in the patients, the galactose index GI value increases. GI value is the total sum of all the 4 values of galactose at 30-minute intervals taken during the 2-hour period. This test is important to know about the liver function. Under normal conditions, less than 3 gram galactose should appear in urine within 5 hours after intake, and less than 100 mg per 100 ml galactose should be present in blood after 2 hours. So the last and the most important test is the hemoglobin A1C, which is shortly called as, whose short form is HbA1c test. So this is a comparatively recent test for determining the blood glucose. The HbA1c test indicates the average level of blood sugar over the past 3 months, and it is related directly to the risk of diabetic complications. Glycation is the non-enzymatic and specific addition of glucose to the N-terminal valine of the hemoglobin beta chain, which is called HbA1c fraction. Other sites are also glycated, such as N-terminus of the alpha chain and epsilon amino groups of lysine residues, collectively called as glycated hemoglobin. However, HbA1c constitutes the highest fraction. It is measured by 4 methods like immunoassays, ion exchange HPLC, boronate affinity HPLC, and enzymatic assays. So in this table you can see that the various percentage of HbA1c and their corresponding average blood sugar level in mg per deciliter. So 4% corresponds to 68, 5 to 97, 6 to 126, 7 to 152, and 8% corresponds to 183 mg per deciliter. So for normal people without diabetes, average normal range is between 4% to 5.6%. Between 5.7 to 6.4 means a higher chance of getting diabetes, and levels below above 6.5% or higher means that the person has diabetes. The target A1C level for people with diabetes is usually 7%. So this much for this lecture. The remaining we will continue with the third lecture. Thank you so much.